What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Dark Previews, and I'm here to give you the most comprehensive NBA player prop preview you're going to see for this upcoming 2-game slate. If it's your first time, I do these videos every single night.
That is outrageous.
I share my screen, we go through outlier.bet. I take you through all the key players, we talk about their matchups, their form lines, what I like, what I don't. And I do all this to give you all the information that you need to make the best bets possible. I also share my best bets, which happened to fucking bang yesterday. 13 plus units profit. Our BAT cash, which is a badass parlay. So if you guys are interested in seeing more of that, let's get into it. Let's go. So we're kicking things off with the Boston Celtics versus the Atlanta Hawks. In terms of matchups, Drew Holiday, Al Horford, Springer, Tillman, all game time decisions for the Celtics. And for the Atlanta Hawks, Okongwu probably could be a key in. He's a game time decision as well. The Celtics are 17.5-point favorites in this game, which is absolutely crazy. So let's jump into these player props. We'll start with these Boston Celtics. Now, I'm not going to make any bets on this just yet. I'm going to have a few leans, but in those leans, I'll talk about who I might bet on depending on who plays, because Drew Holiday not being there, or if he is there, it does impact quite a few players. Let's start with Jaylen Brown, though. His points line, 22.5. He's covered this line in 8 out of his last 10 games. The 2 games he went under, scored 21 points in both of them. In terms of head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 6 out of his last 11, averaging 24 points per game against the Atlanta Hawks. In terms of the matchup, he does have a pretty good matchup too. So my gut feel is to take the over in this one. It's on my short list, and I'll investigate that a little bit later on. Jumping into his assist prop, the line's at 2.5. 7 out of his last 10, but he has gone under in 3 straight. In head-to-head matchups, 7 out of his last 11, averaging 3.1 assists per game against the Atlanta Hawks. If we look at the rebound prop, that's at 5.5. 4 out of his last 10. Tough matchup here against the Hawks, and he's covered in only 4 of his last 11. I think when you're looking at this game, one thing that'll probably help you make your decision is whether you think Atlanta will cover this 17.5-point spread or not. Because if you think the Celtics are going to cover it, you're asking for a blowout, meaning a lot of these guys probably won't play their normal minutes. So opportunities would be down. Who else have we got? Let's have a look at Kristaps Porzingis. So his points line in this game, 17.5. Does seem quite low, but the blowout risk is there. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10 games. Against Atlanta, he's hit in 1 of his last 2. The game he went under, scored 17 points. If we look at his rebound prop, that's 6.5. He's covered in only 4 of his last 10. Does have a good matchup, but he's gone under in 2 consecutive games against the Atlanta Hawks. If you like his 3-point line, it's 1.5. He's hit in 7 out of his last 10, 1 out of his last 2 against the Atlanta Hawks. Derek White, now his points line, 13.5. He's covered this in 4 consecutive games. It has a good matchup here, and against Atlanta, he's covered in 8 out of his last 11, averaging 16 points per game. So Derek White's recent uplift in performance, one contributing factor is the fact that Drew Holiday has been out of the lineup. Derek White, more opportunities there. So he's someone that probably the most impacted by Drew Holiday's absence. Looking at his assists, very much the same. Recent uplift, lines at 5.5. He's hit in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup's not too bad, but in head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 5 out of his last 11. Played the Atlanta Hawks twice this year, 11 and 7 assists against them. Rebound-wise, we're looking at 4.5. He's covered in 9 out of his last 10 games. Against Atlanta, 5 out of his last 11. So his points and his assist prop, a fair bit of interest around that. 19.5 is what we're looking at. Yeah, 5 out of his last 10, 8 of his last 11 against Atlanta. That's something I don't mind. I've got it down as a lean at the moment, but yeah, we'll see where we go and how these lineups finish up. Jason Tatum. So he's got a good matchup too. He's lined at 26.5. He's hit in 5 of his last 10. Just scored 37 points against the Atlanta Hawks in a game that they just lost. And he's covered in 7 out of his last 11 against them. His assist line's at 5.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10 games. In head-to-head matches, 6 of his last 11. Rebound-wise, 7.5's the line, 4 of his last 10, but he's rebounded extremely well against the Atlanta Hawks. Check that out. 9 out of his last 11 games, he's gone over 7.5 boards. If you want to look at his 3-point line, that's 2.5. He's covered in 6 of his last 10, 8 of his last 11 against the Atlanta Hawks. Has gone under in 2 straight. In those games, he attempted 13 and 7 3-pointers, so very poor shooting performance from Jason Tatum. Given his volume, you'd really expect him to go over that line. Odds at minus 145. they indicate the over as well. Having a look at these Atlanta Hawks. So we'll start with DeJounte Murray. It was a game time decision in the game he played today because of his back against Portland. Still played well. Scored 30 points in this one. He's not a game time decision here. So let's cap him out. 6 out of his last 10 games, he's covered this line. He's averaged almost 28 points per game. In head-to-head matchups against Boston, though, he's only covered in 2 out of his last 9. His three-point line's at 3. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10, but only 2 of his last 9 against Boston. His assist line at 8.5. He's hit in 7 of his last 10 games, 7 assists against Portland, and in head-to-head matchups, had 15 assists the last game against the Boston Celtics, covering in only 2 of his last 9. Rebounds, you see it's at 5.5. 4 out of his last 10, 5 out of his last 9 against the Boston Celtics. So the matchup, it's not going to be too different compared to the last time they played Boston. It was only a few days ago. I don't like these games where they're pretty much playing each other almost back-to-back, very, very close. Well, it is a back-to-back for Boston, and all they'd be thinking about is revenge because the Atlanta Hawks beat them by 2 points. What I can see the Celtics doing is potentially switching it up. We might see a massive swing in DeJounte Murray's performance, a big uplift in his points, and a reduction in his assists because him distributing the ball, getting everyone else involved, killed the Celtics last time. They might look to limit that and allow DeJounte to go one-on-one perhaps, but I'll have to look into that a bit more. Who else do we have? Bogdanovic. I took his under against the Boston Celtics last time, and it killed me. He scored 22 points, but his line's at 17.5. It hasn't moved. Tough matchup still. 3 out of his last 10, covered in 4 out of his last 9. So the under's at minus 119. I'm honestly thinking of taking the under here, purely because he's inconsistent. I was somewhat confident taking his under last time, but he played quite well. I just don't think, look, Boston is 17.5 point favorites. They're not going to let him score another 22 points on them, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, I'm leaning towards his under. His 3-point prop, 2.5. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10 games, though, which is pretty good. And against the Celtics, he's covered in 5 out of his last 9. His assist line's at 3.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. And only 3 of his last 9 against the Boston Celtics. Have a look at Clint Capella now. His line's at 12.5. He's hit in 7 of his last 10, scored 14 points in that last matchup against the Boston Celtics. He's hit in 1 of his last 10. So those 14 points against them was the first time in 9 games that he was able to cover that line. And his rebound line is at 10.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10, had 12 boards against the Celtics last time. And in head-to-head matchups, he's only hit in 2 of his last 10. So, geez, similar to Bogdanovic, I just don't feel like they'll be able to have their way with them once again. So what I'm thinking is an under in his points and an under in his rebounds. But maybe if we have a look at both and just take the under in his point. Look, it seems like a crazy play. He's hit the over in 8 of his last 10 games. So if I look at the under here, it's minus 108. He's only hit in 2 of his last 10. But it has cashed in 9 of his last 10 against the Boston Celtics. If we look at minutes, that last game against Boston, he played 29 minutes. It's not that much higher than what he had been getting in the past. And there's also a chance Okongwu could be back. Okongwu could snake some of Clint Capella's minutes here. So whilst recording this, I should talk myself into it. I'm really thinking about taking the under here for Clint Capella. Let's do it. Might be a little bit of unders here on the Atlanta Hawks. Just saying. We've got DeAndre Hunter. His line at 17.5. Tough matchup. He's hitting 4 of his last 10. He scored 24 points against Boston last time in head-to-head matches. He's had a bit of success. 5 out of his last 12. His rebound prop, 4.5. 3 of his last 10. Hit in 2 straight. And in head-to-head matchups, 4 of his last 12. All right, so those are the key players from this game. Probably won't place any bets for a lot of the guys from Boston. I probably wouldn't place any bets until Drew Holiday is confirmed in or out. Or if I do take a bet, it'd be because Drew Holiday doesn't have an impact on that person's lines. But I'll research all that a little bit later on before I get my pinned comments out, of course. Pumping the brakes real quick on this one. And firstly, I want to apologize if my energy levels aren't where they usually are. I've actually been hit by the spicy cough, so a little bit of COVID's run rampant through my household, and it's really starting to fucking smash me at the moment. So
you definitely have COVID.
My bad if the same energy levels aren't there. I also want you to type in hashtag BAP in the comment section below if you got on our badass parlay and absolutely cashed in those winners. So that was a pretty good feeling. I did want to remind you all of the watch party. New Orleans Pelicans versus Milwaukee Bucks. Check that video description below. You'll see a link to Playback TV. All you have to do is click on that link, sign up to Playback TV for free. It doesn't cost you a cent. Jump into the chat room. If you don't have NBA League Pass, I can hook you up. I do have only a limited number, so get there early if you want to take part. We'll be chatting throughout the game. Tested it out today. Had quite a bit of fun. I think it was only 8 to 10 people in there today, but it was still a lot of fun. Given we get thousands of people watch these videos every day, hopefully we can get 100. 100 would be nice. Just chop it up, ride the same bets together if we have to, talk a little bit of shit. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So check that out. Video description, the link to Playback TV. You'll find draft previews in there. Watch party for the New Orleans Pelicans versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Speaking of the Milwaukee Bucks and the New Orleans Pelicans, who do we have? Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Pat Beverly, all game time decisions, as well as Jose Alvarado, all are quite likely to play. Well, probably not Alvarado and Beverly, but Middleton and Giannis, they are. So let's check out these Milwaukee Bucks first, and then we'll finish off with the Pelicans. Now, this is going to be a great game. Part of the reason why I picked this game, it's a 2-point spread. Should be close. There's some good matchups. Zion versus Giannis, Dame, CJ. It should be pretty good. They're the only ones. But the key matchups, it's going to be nice to watch, I believe. So let's start with Milwaukee. We'll go Damian Lillard first. Now, he's got a difficult matchup here. He's covered his line of 23.5 in 6 out of his last 10. He's averaging 24 points per game in that span. Did versus the Pelicans in the end of January. The Bucks absolutely romped the Pels, 141 and 117. Dame scored 26 points in that game. If we want to look at his assist line, it's at 6.5. He has hit this in 6 of his last 10 games, covering this line. 9.1 is his average assists over his last 10. So doing a great job at the moment, Dame. And the last time he versed the Pels, he had 9 assists. So he absolutely carved them up, both points and assists. Interested to see how the Pelicans play him and what adjustments they make, because I don't believe they're going to let him score and drop dimes all over him 2 games in a row. You know what I'm saying? Checking Dame's 3-point line, it's at 3.5. He's hit in 6 of his last 10 games. Only hit 3 3-pointers the last time he versed the Pels on 7 attempts. His rebound line's at 3.5. He's got a difficult matchup here. 7 out of his last 10 games, though. And he had 6 rebounds last time. So he covered all 3 of his lines, points, rebounds, and assists. Dame got it done against the Pelicans in that last game. And he's exceeded 3.5 rebounds in 8 of his last 10 games on the road. So, yeah, Dame, I think just his PRA, I think it's worth doing a deeper dive into all of this type of stuff. But what does make it easier is after I look at every single player, it gives me a good sense of who potentially could and who will not. And that lets me know, doesn't let me know, it gives me a good idea as to who's most likely to perform. So I think Dame is most likely to perform based on what I've seen, but he's obviously the first player, right? So small sample size for Dame, but let's check out Giannis, see what his numbers look like. So his point sign's at 30.5. He's covered this line in 4 out of his last 10. Does have a difficult matchup here. In his head-to-head matchup, scored 30 against the Pels, 50 and 42 in the 2 games prior to that. So Giannis finishes on 30 points quite a lot. Gets very close to this line. Looking at his assist prop, he does have some massive games when it comes to his assists, but he's hit this line in 6 of his last 10, averaging 7 assists per game. Just had 11 assists against the Lakers, getting a triple-double. In head-to-head matchups against the Pels, though, he's gone under in 3 consecutive games. And why is that? Let's check it out. He's averaging 13.3 potential assists. In his last 10, he's averaging 14.3 potential assists. So, which means he's making the same number of passes pretty much. Shots are going up. They're just not going in. And, you know, the Pels are a pretty good defensive unit. So, might be a little bit more difficult than usual for Giannis to get his assists. He's under an assist, I might consider. That's going to be a very painful play. Good odds, though, plus 114. But it's a ballsy play. He's only hit the under 5.5 assists in 43% of games this year. But obviously, that record against the Pels is not great. So, struggled against the Pels, we shall see. Maybe I think Dame's going to go off on assists. Could be a good play where you put them both together. But we shall see. I'll dive a bit further, I promise you that. Rebound-wise, Giannis's line is 12.5. He's had 2 massive rebound games, 19 against OKC, 21 against the Lakers. 5 out of his last 10, averaging 12 boards. And in head-to-head matchups, he's hit in one of his last 3 against the Pelicans. So I don't know if I bet on Giannis because his lines are super tight. You've really got to look for an outlier. I can't really find one. Probably he's under an assist, probably giving me the clearest signs. But yeah, I'm not loving what I'm seeing there for Giannis props. Let's have a look at Bobby Portis. So Bobby's been playing pretty good as of late. Check this out. Line at 13.5. He's covered this in 4 of his last 5, 6 out of his last 10. He'll most likely be playing against people like Larry Nance off the bench. He did score 20 points in that last matchup against the Pels, but 22 minutes, probably part of the blowout. Got some extra opportunities within that. So I don't hate Bobby Portis, especially if we don't love the points prop for Giannis. We don't love it for Dame. If we don't, then someone like Bobby Portis or Chris Middleton, Malik Beasley, good chance for them. Now, Bobby's covered this line in 14 of his last 20 games, so I don't hate the points line here for Bobby Portis. Looking at his rebound line, 6 of his last 10 games he's gone over. Has got 2 consecutive games against the Pels. Having a quick look at his minutes here. In his last 10, playing 26.8 minutes, especially over his last 5, he's seen a big uplift. Check this out. 30.1 minutes a game in his last 5. Those 2 games against the Pels, he only played 22 minutes, right? So he scored 20 points in 22 minutes last time, 4 points the first time. He probably should get an extra 10 minutes. So if he plays 30 minutes, Bobby Portis, yeah, I honestly don't mind this points and even his rebound line. I don't mind it as well. But let me take notes of his points line, something for me to dive into. Check out Chris Middleton. So his points prop 14.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10 games. He's gone under in his last matchup against the Pels. Only played 17 minutes in that game. The Bucks did win that by 25 points. His assist prop 5.5. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10. 4 consecutive games since he came back from injury. Chris Middleton's been diamond up. Head-to-head matchups. Only had 4 assists last time against the Pels, but he did it in 17.5 minutes. Right? Since he come back from injury, he's seen about 30 minutes a night. So Chris Middleton assists. I don't mind that. Can find some reasons to bet it. Let's go. And let's have a look at his line. 4.5. Let's look at just his last 5 games because he's played 4 games since his return from injury. 3 out of his last 5, head-to-head, he only had 3 boards. And again, only played 17 minutes. So, yeah, I don't mind the rebound line for Chris Middleton. We can possibly look at rebounds plus assists. Let's check that out. Line's at 10.5. I think the assist prop is the better one, but this rebound one he's been going over quite easily. The matchup, it's more difficult for rebounds than it is assists, though. But yeah, I'll take a look at both. Why the hell not? There's only 2 games on, right? I got some extra time. Let's have a look at Malik Beasley. So Malik Beasley's line's at 10.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10 games. Did score 8 points in that last game against the Pels in 28 minutes. Didn't shoot very well. Looking at his 3-point line now, 2.5. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. He does have a great matchup here. The Pels are the 4th most 3-pointers made to shooting guards on the season. As a team, they allow a lot of 3-pointers as well. So this actually blends in well to the Chris Middleton assist prop, perhaps. Chris Middleton's not driving and dumping many off. He is finding shooters outside. So Malik Beasley to go over 2.5. I don't hate that. Made 1 3-pointer last time against the Pels. He only shot 1 for 7, right? But the volume's good. It means he had 7 attempts. I guarantee you at least half of those would have been wide open. So, yeah, I'd lean to the over in this one. Minus 140, that's not great. But I'll do a little bit of line shopping. See if I can find anything of value. His rebound prop is over 3. But he had 4 rebounds last time against the Pels. But, yeah, I don't know anybody who's ever bet on Malik Beasley rebounds before. Let's check out Brook Lopez. Now, sweet Brook, his line's at 9.5. The matchup's not too bad in this one against Jonas Valanciunas. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. He's averaging 11.1 points per game in that span. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 3 consecutive games against the Pels. Killed them with 24 last time. What was he doing? Playing 34 minutes a night in those games. Over his last 5, he's only playing 24 minutes. I could see some people looking at Brook Lopez numbers and saying, yeah, look, he's capable of it. Last time he played the Pels, he killed them. He's killed them 3 straight now. So they'll take the bet at 9.5 for Brook Lopez. But the way that I see it is the sportsbooks have set the line at 9.5 for a reason. because given he's only playing 27 minutes now, so that's 7 minutes less than he was playing in the 3 games against our friends here from the New Orleans Pelicans, they would have reduced his line. So I can, even though these are great games, his line for these would have been 14.5, I think, I'd guess. But positive EV play. So I'm honestly leaning to the over as well. But we've already gone through the other Bucks players, and we've seen over the last 5 games especially, right? Over the last 5 games especially, Bobby Portis is getting a lot more minutes. Bobby Portis is actually playing more minutes than Brook Lopez over their last 5. So, yeah, I'm like a Bobby Portis opportunity there. I would lean to the over here for Brook Lopez because a lot of this data is compelling. But for me, the minute side of things leaves me a little bit hesitant. His 3-point props at 1.5, though. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10. He did hit 6 3-pointers against the Pelicans the last time they played. Obviously, 34 minutes, attempted 9 threes. If we look at his last 5 games, he's taking 4.6 attempts per game, which is a decent amount. I did back him for 2 3-pointers made against the Lakers. He took 4. Fortunately, he only made the 1. The Pels don't allow too many 3-pointers centers, believe it or not. So, yeah, to share my 2 cents on that one. I do like Bobby Portis a little bit more. But let's jump into these New Orleans Pelicans. We'll start with Zion Williamson. So he's got a tough matchup here against Giannis. His line's only at 25.5, despite having 2 strong games since Brandon Ingram went down. 7 out of his last 10, but he's gone under in 2 consecutive games against the Milwaukee Bucks. You want to look at his assist prop? He's been getting quite a few assists. Had 10 assists in that last game. His line's at 6.5. It's plus money. He's hit this in 2 of his last 10. In head-to-head matchups, he's hit 1 of his last 2 against the Milwaukee Bucks. His rebound line is at 6.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10 and 1 of his last 2 against Milwaukee. So, yeah, I'm not really feeling anything for Zion right now, just based off these numbers. CJ McCollum. So I've bet CJ McCollum over 19.5 points in 2 consecutive games, Detroit and OKC. In both of those games, he had one of the worst first quarters I've ever seen, going like 0 for 7, like shooting absolute trash. But somehow, late in the game, he makes it happen. So just check this out. His first quarter points actually hits at a decent rate. And look, it doesn't surprise me. He is very aggressive. He takes a lot of shots, especially when his legs are fresh. But I guess what the point I'm trying to illustrate there is, even if he gets off to a slow start, CJ McCollum will deliver. So he's covered in 4 out of his last 10, has a good matchup here against Milwaukee Bucks. Only scored 7 points in that last matchup against them. Only played 22 minutes and took 7 shots. So that may have been around his injury period, perhaps, or it's just the blowout. But that last game against the Milwaukee Bucks is not a realistic representation of where CJ McCollum is now. But the game prior to that isn't either. Back in December 2022, he scored 22 points, 11 from 24 shots, playing 41 minutes a night. Are you crazy? No. So I think he'll play between 35 and 40 minutes. He'll probably take almost 20 shots in this game, I imagine. So his line at 21.5, though. So it's gone up by 2 points since the last time up against the Milwaukee Bucks. I would honestly still lean to the over here for CJ, but let's get through all the players for the Pels, and then that'll give us a good understanding of where CJ's sitting. His assist line is at 5.5, so even that's gone up, and that's because over his last 5 games, we've seen an increase, right? 5 of his last 6, he's covered this assist line. Matchup somewhat difficult against the Bucks. He's covered in 1 of his last 2. His 3-point line is at 3.5. He's hit 6 of his last 10, 3 consecutive games now. In terms of his attempts, in those last 3 games, 12, 9, and 11 3-point attempts. He's also up against his old running mate, Dame Lillard. So they might get into a little bit of a duel. So, yeah, I'd lean to the over there on CJ's 3-pointers made. If we just check the matchup, the Bucks 13th fewest 3-pointers on the season, the 12th. So they're not too bad. They're fine. They're not elite at all, but I'll check that out for CJ. And then his rebound prop at 4.5. 3 out of his last games. The matchup, not too bad. 1 of his last 2 against them. So not loving his rebound numbers because his rebound chances are very inconsistent. But points and potentially his assists might be something I could screw around with. Just having a look now. There is an increase in his potential assists, obviously without Brandon Ingram. But yeah, I'll do a deeper dive and I'll see where I land with CJ McCollum. We've got Herb Jones. I made the mistake of not even looking at his prop last time because he's not Forgot to go back and dissect it a bit further, and he had a pretty good game. 16 points against OKC. His line is at 11.5. He's hit this in 3 of his last 10. Has gone under in 3 straight against the Milwaukee Bucks, though. His 3-point line's at 1.5. 2 out of his last 3 against the Bucks. 4 of his last 10 overall. What else does Herb Jones do? Rebound, perhaps? He just plays defense. So, yeah, nothing happened for Herb Jones. Trey Murphy. Someone you'd expect to see the biggest uplift with no Brandon Ingram. Unfortunately, since Brandon Ingram's left, he hasn't necessarily hit this line. So he's got a good matchup here against the Bucks, don't get me wrong. He's got a significant size advantage as well. It's likely he'll have Chris Middleton defending him. Trey Murphy's hit this in 3 out of his last 10 games, though. He's gone under in his last 2 against the Bucks, playing on average 32 minutes a night. As of recently, he's playing 32 minutes a night as well. Shot attempts, they haven't increased without Brandon Ingram, which is pretty wild. But let's look at his 3-point mark at 2.5. He has hit this in 6 of his last 10, though. That's not too bad. 1 of his last 2 against Milwaukee. Rebounds, 5.5's the line. Gone under in 2 straight against the Bucks. But he has been rebounding quite well. Check this out. And fair enough, Jonas Valanciunas isn't the great rebounder he used to be. Zion Williamson is an undersized power forward. Doesn't rebound very well. Herb Jones defends the best perimeter player for the opposition. So he's not going to be in a good position to get some boards. That leaves someone like Herb Jones to go get some rebounds. You know what I'm saying? Now, he hasn't hit this against the Bucks in the past, but I'm willing to say fuck you to history because I like what I'm seeing here. And the script in my mind tells me that either Trey Murphy or CJ McCollum are going to have a big rebounding game in this one. One of them two, I can really see it. The Bucks do have shooters all over the court, but whoever spends most of their time defending the weak side probably has a good chance to get some boards in this one because Zion, Jonas, Herb Jones, I can see them being very busy. You got Giannis attacking the rim. You got DeRozan all over the joint. Chris Middleton sitting in the corner being ugly. Like, they're going to be busy. So someone like Trey Murphy, don't mind the look at his rebound props. I'll dive into that. And lastly, we've got Jonas Valanciunas. I bet on him in his last game. Here against OKC. His line was, 9.5, 10.5 points. He finished on 6, right? But what's crazy is he had 6 points at the end of the first quarter or by halftime. He only played 10 minutes in that fucking game. I was expecting at least 20 for you, Jonas. Old-ass dog. But look, he's got a good matchup here against the Bucks. Historically, he's covered in 3 straight against them. But look, I don't know what's going on with this man. So I'm not liking the look of that pick. Larry Nance will probably take most of his minutes anyway. So there's a quick look over the 2 games for tomorrow. Hopefully I was able to share something of value to you and you've taken some notes and you started to do your own research as well. Obviously, I'm going to jump into the lab, dive into this a little bit deeper to make sure we've got some juicy props and bets. I'll put something together for a BAP. I might even have some same-game parlays. I might have some high-value singles. I might have a few things because we fucked around a little bit today. 18 bets I put up, but hey, all worth it in the end if we get up 13 units, right? So profit is king, and I shall take it. But look, despite how I feel, whether my COVID symptoms get worse tomorrow and I feel like absolute shit, don't you worry. I will be turning up to the watch party regardless. I might have a blanket around me, but that watch party, feel free to jump in 30 minutes before that game starts. The New Orleans Pelicans versus Milwaukee Bucks. To get your mouth wet, I'll even play the Boston Celtics at Atlanta game. I'll play the second half of that one if I'm there. And we can talk through it, share bets, do all these types of things. It's going to be a lot of fun, man. So click on that video description. Sign up to Playback TV. It's completely free, costs you nothing. And then you'll be able to watch these games with me tomorrow. Best of luck to you all. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.